I am proud to be a part of the innovation support system, and we help a lot of people at our university to take new technology to the market. In the past 12 years, we've had over 2,000 new ideas come through our doors, but only about 16% of them have come from women. Now, you might ask, do women not want to be tech entrepreneurs? Well, I think they do, but I'd like to use this opportunity to highlight a few issues that I think contribute to women not choosing a career as a tech entrepreneur and ignoring our invitation of support. Firstly, I don't always think that they realize that we're there for them. In entrepreneurship, the man is norm, and over the years we've tailored our support to him. We invite women to join in, but I'm not sure that they're super excited about taking part in activities where they're always set aside as not the norm, but the other. There's a great satirical Twitter account called Man Who Has It All, and he's made an art form out of pointing out the absurdities of gender inequality simply by replacing the word woman with man. Here's an example. Will you stop saying boys in tech? We're just men to happen to be in tech. Whines bitter James, bringing his gender into everything as usual. Now, I think we need to work harder to dispel this norm. Another thing that this norm does is that we tend to differentiate between women's issues and entrepreneurship issues. I read this headline in a women's magazine. I'm more successful than my boyfriend. Can we date happily if he feels I emasculate him? Now, at first, that sounds like a woman's issue, something you discuss with your girlfriends. But it must be a huge problem for an entrepreneur to even have to consider the feelings of a less successful partner. And it affects exactly the driven and ambitious woman who would be a great entrepreneur. Yet, I haven't to date seen a single inspirational quote for women along the lines of, "Leave the guy, he's not worth it." I have, however, seen a number of inspirational quotes for entrepreneurs that include things like, "Don't be cocky, don't be flashy, there's always someone better than you." Or, "If you're not a risk taker, you should get the hell out of business." Now, that's hardly inspirational if at the same time you're told that based on your gender, you lack confidence and the willingness to take risks. Man Who Has It All has an inspirational tip of his own. All men, you can be anything you want to be. Don't let your crazy hormones, irrational moods, or inferior intellect hold you back. I think that we need to do more to inspire all kinds of entrepreneurs. And then we've got the issue of the gender bias. Last year there was a study in the Harvard Business Review that has venture capitalists down as saying that people who display stereotypically female behaviors and traits should tone it down whilst pitching. And the rather surprising conclusion of the article was that advice to women should include not being so damn feminine. Man Who Has It All has a little tip of his own. Men, if you want to be taken seriously in meetings, avoid using the word perhaps, maybe, sorry, or any word starting with the letter A to Z. When I was asked to do this talk and immediately said yes, the first thing I blurted out was, "I know exactly what I'm going to wear." And I regretted it immediately. I felt like it was such a girly thing to say. And I wanted to explain myself. What I wear impacts how I feel and how I act, and ultimately how I perform. So I was strategizing. But is this the typical kind of female behavior that I should be toning down? Or can we arrive at a point in time when my professionalism isn't mistaken for girlishness? The next thing I'd like to talk about is leaning in. We tend to say that women should lean in. They should make their voices heard, take part, and they should, and they do. But I see two issues with this. One is that sometimes the space to lean into is already crowded with how it is. Written and unwritten rules, regulations, convention, criteria that women were never part of conceiving in the first place. If we already know what a good entrepreneur is, and we base that on what a good entrepreneur has always been, then the space to lean into is non-existent. Here comes a little tip again from Man Who Has It All. He puts it like this: men in science, don't let grant allocation processes, publishing routines, hiring processes, harassment, or hostile labs put you off. And then sometimes you lean into a black hole. Let me tell you a little anecdote of mine. We were 5 people round a lunch table. There were 2 women and 3 men. We got onto the very Swedish subject of curing salmon. There's 2 different ways, but what is actually the difference? So the other woman at the table said, I think it's got to do with the proportion of salt to sugar. That's the difference. Which is the right answer? The men then around the table said, yeah, or maybe it's the herbs you use, or how long you marinate it for. And now the woman realizes, no, they haven't understood that she had the correct answer. So she says again, a little more assertively, no, it's actually got to do with the proportion of salt to sugar. And they said, yeah, or maybe. And I asked, why do you keep guessing when we've already had the correct answer? And they were bemused. They didn't realize that that was the answer. They thought she was just guessing. So my point here is that you can lean in all you want. You can have all the competence and all the right answers, but there's got to be someone on the receiving end who hears you. I believe that we, in the innovation support system, have to be on the receiving end, and we have to learn to hear. Finally, I'd like to talk about feelings. We often say that failure, courage, risk-taking are all part of the entrepreneurial journey. And if you're a human being, then those things come with feelings. Failure will have some element of disappointment. Courage and fear are closely linked. And risk-taking will bring some anxiety and maybe also excitement. But we don't talk about those feelings. I had a brush with emotion just last week when I was preparing for this talk. I went in to get feedback from a colleague. And there I was across from this experienced person, an expert in public speaking, and someone I really respect. And I did my talk, and he gave me constructive and helpful feedback. And there was nothing negative in there. But still I left the room with a little bit of insecurity. I felt a bit doubtful. And I just couldn't understand why. And I kept coming back to this feeling and thinking about it, and then it clicked. So I went back to him and I said, you know, when we talked yesterday and you gave me feedback, I left feeling a little bit insecure. And I think it had to do with the way we talked. We were all up here, but we completely forgot about down here. My brain loved the feedback, but my feelings would have needed to be addressed and validated too. So he thanked me for bringing it up and talking about it. And I said, well, don't people generally talk to you about these kinds of things? And he said, no, never. I think that's sad, but it's not surprising. We just don't talk about these feelings. Doubt and insecurities has no place in the image of the entrepreneur. So, man who has it all, finally, has something to say about this. Today's fact. Women's view of the world is impassionate, empirical and objective, while men will always be at the mercy of their irrational, illogical feelings. Now, if we come back to the question, why don't women want to be entrepreneurs? I would say, I think they do. They just don't want to be male entrepreneurs. Thank you.